Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Hey guys, I always get these groups of people mixed up whenever I watch Roman history videos, for instance, and I hear about these northern Germanic tribes, and there are a bunch of them. I always get them mixed up. Every major Germanic tribe explained by a German, Professor Stein, preemptive like, hopefully this will clear things up for me. So, time to pay super attention time. I'm ready. Original link to the video, top of the description if you just want to watch it on your own or check it out. Go ahead. Let's go. Lock
The
in.
Varangians were Viking conquerors, traders, and settlers, mainly from present-day Sweden, who arrived in present-day Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine during the 8th and 9th centuries. In 862, a Varangian group settled in Novgorod under Rurik, whose relative Oleg later conquered Kiev in 882, forming the foundation of the Kievan Rus state, ruled by Rurik's descendants.
Oh, that's interesting. So, going back to the formation of Russia,
Varangians dominated key trade routes, linking the Baltic with the Caspian and Black Seas. These trade routes connected medieval Europe, the Abbasid Caliphate, and Byzantium. Drawn by Constantinople's wealth, they waged wars against the Byzantines. By the early 10th century, many served in the Byzantine military as the elite Varangian Guard. Over time, they were converted from Norse paganism to Orthodox Christianity, especially after the Christianization of Kievan Rus in 988. As the Viking Age declined, Scandinavian influence in Rus faded, and the Varangians assimilated into the East Slavic population by the late 11th century.
Interesting. Okay, so big background in Russian history, obviously. And in the latter part of the first millennium, that's as much as I really want to absorb, because anything else, I'm just going to forget it all. So, good starting point.
The Vandals were a Germanic people, first recorded in what is now Poland during the Roman Empire. Linked to the Przeworsk culture and the Lugi tribes, they expanded into the Roman...
Okay, Varangian Vandals now, Poland.
East Slavic population by the late 11th century. The Vandals were a Germanic people, first recorded in what is now Poland during the Roman Empire. Linked to the Przeworsk culture and the Lugi tribes, they expanded into the Roman province of Dacia during the Marcomannic Wars and later Pannonia. However, the Goths confined them to Pannonia around 330 AD. As Hunnic raids pushed Germanic tribes westward, the Vandals crossed the Rhine into Gaul and then crossed the Pyrenees, settling in the Iberian Peninsula in 409. After Visigothic attacks nearly wiped out the Selingi Vandals, the survivors united under Hasdingian leader Gunderic. His successor Genseric led them across the Mediterranean in 429, establishing a powerful North African kingdom by 439, which included Sicily, Corsica, Sardinia, Malta, and the Balearic Islands. Genseric later used the captured Carthaginian fleet to launch raids across the Mediterranean. The Vandals repelled multiple Roman attempts to reclaim their African kingdom.
Holy crap, so Vandals, super huge deal. And I know you might be thinking, yeah, me after watching so many history videos, like, you don't know this about the Vandals. I get them confused. I'm trying to solidify it here.
It later used the captured Carthaginian fleet to launch raids across the Mediterranean. The Vandals repelled multiple Roman attempts to reclaim their African kingdom and famously sacked Rome in 455. Their kingdom fell in 533 when Justinian's forces reconquered the region. Because they sacked Rome, Renaissance writers painted them as barbarians, giving rise to the term vandalism for wanton destruction.
I think I've heard that.
Goths played a key role in the fall of the Western Roman Empire.
Okay, so Vandals, Central Europe, modern day Germany area, all over the place in the Roman Empire, and post Roman Empire. So, okay.
Destruction. The Goths played a key role in the fall of the Western Roman Empire and the rise of medieval Europe. First mentioned in the 3rd century AD, they lived north of the Danube in present-day Ukraine, Moldova and Romania, raiding Roman territory and serving in the Roman military. In the 4th century, the Huns and Alans pushed into Gothic lands, forcing many to seek refuge in the Roman Empire. This led to conflict, culminating in their decisive victory at the Battle of Adrianople in 3.
Wait a second. 4th century. 4th century. So they're in the same time in the same place as the Vandals? Are all of these names more Byzantine and Roman given names to people that might not be accurate? Or were these known names that the people referred to themselves? Because I'm wondering maybe if the Romans confused one larger group of people as maybe two people. So the Goths and Vandals, or the... Okay.
First mentioned in the 3rd century AD, they lived north of the Danube in present-day Ukraine, Moldova and Romania, raiding Roman territory and serving in the Roman military. In the 4th century, the Huns and Alans pushed into Gothic lands, forcing many to seek refuge in the Roman Empire. This led to conflict, culminating in their decisive victory at the Battle of Adrianople in 378. The Goths were one of the first Germanic tribes to convert from paganism to Arian Christianity, which led to religious conflicts with the Catholic Romans. At the same time, Goths converting to Christianity were also subject to persecution by the Gothic king Athanaric. Some Goths settled within the empire, while others under Alaric I formed the Visigoths, who later established a kingdom in Spain.
See? I did hear about that, learn about the Battle of Adrianople, where the Goths came in, the Romans wanted to make them complete subjects, or they gave them refuge over the Danube, and then they were unruly, and then they were tried to put down, but the Goths actually won, and then the Byzantines just kind of had to deal with them and say, fine, you can rule yourselves over there.
Formed the Visigoths, who later established a kingdom in Spain. Meanwhile, the Ostrogoths, once under Hunnic rule, regained independence and under Theodoric the Great founded the Ostrogothic kingdom in Italy. The Eastern Roman Empire crushed the Ostrogoths in the 6th century, while the Visigothic kingdom fell to the Umayyad Caliphate in the 8th century, leaving only a remnant in Asturias under Pelagius, that later initiated the Reconquista. A Gothic community survived in Crimea for over 1,000 years, but the Goths eventually disappeared as a distinct people. Though Gothic architecture, literature, and the modern Goth subculture take their name from them, the ancient Goths had no influence on that. The Normans
It's really I love videos like this that show the traveling of peoples. It shows you how the term native or indigenous to an area just it doesn't make any sense. It's just like there's no area in the world where a group of people were like naturally in that area, right? So a lot of what you see, the Reconquista, just spit there, sorry. The Reconquista, as obviously it's a Spanish thing, but how it was really started from a peoples from more Central Europe who went to Spain and then were kicked out by the Umayyads and then had this area, and that's known as like super Spanish history. It's interesting.
That later initiated the Reconquista.
It's probably obvious to a lot of people, but it's cool to think about.
The community survived in Crimea for over 1,000 years, but the Goths eventually disappeared as a distinct people. Though Gothic architecture, literature, and the modern Goth subculture take their name from them, the ancient Goths had no influence on that. The Normans originated in the medieval duchy of Normandy, formed through the...
I'm more solid in knowing who the
Integration
Normans are.
of
I
Norse
feel.
Viking settlers with the local Frankish population. Initially raiding the northern coast of West Francia, they settled permanently when their leader, Rollo, swore fealty to King Charles III in 911. Over time, the Normans adopted Frankish culture, local language, Christianity, and social customs while maintaining a strong warrior tradition and their Norse roots. Their influence extended through their conquest of England in 1066, when William the Conqueror defeated King Harold II at the Battle of Hastings, which established Norman rule. Norman armored cavalry was highly effective and marked a tactical innovation in medieval warfare. The Normans also expanded into Italy, founding the Kingdom of Sicily after fighting against the Saracens and the Byzantines. They also played roles in the Iberian Reconquista. The Normans brought castle building, administrative reforms, and military innovations wherever they went. Their influence stretched from Britain to the Mediterranean and even to the Near East, where they were instrumental in the establishment of the Crusader states. The Franks were a confederation of tribes that originally lived beyond the Rhine River in what was then the northern border of the Roman Empire. They first appeared in historical records in the 3rd century AD, at a time when Rome was struggling to maintain control over the region. Over time, the Franks became increasingly integrated into the Roman world, serving as mercenaries and even rising to high ranks in the imperial military. In 388, the Franks crossed the Rhine and invaded northern Gaul to plunder. The Roman response was swift, launching a punitive expedition that was ultimately defeated by the Franks. This invasion was one of many that contributed to the weakening of Roman control over its western borders. By the early 5th century, the Franks were living semi-independently in Germania Inferior, playing a role in both defending and attacking Roman territories. In 406 AD, some Franks tried to defend the Roman border against the Alans and the Vandals, playing a role in both defending and attacking Roman territories. In 406 AD, some Franks tried to defend the Roman border against the Alans and the Vandals. They couldn't hold them back, but they later took advantage of Rome's weakening grip, expanding their own power in northern Gaul. As the Western Roman Empire weakened further, Frankish leaders like Clodio expanded southward, ruling over Romanized populations. But in 451 AD, they fought on both sides of the Battle of the Catalonian Plains against Attila the Hun. Eventually, the Frank Clovis I united the Frankish kingdoms and established the Merovingian dynasty. Clovis's conversion to Catholicism aligned the Frankish kingdom closely with the Roman Church. His descendants, the Carolingians, further expanded the Frankish realm, culminating in Charlemagne's coronation as Emperor of the West in 800 AD. The Frankish realm later split, laying the foundations for both France and the Holy Roman Empire.
See, with a lot of these terms, and they're all seem to be in the same time period. I mean, everything we've covered so far has been between 200 AD to 600, 700 AD, except for I think it was the first. Was it the first one we covered? We're at 712, except the Vandals, who I think they went into like the 1100s, but it seems like so many of them overlap that I would think, the Franks and the Gauls and the Goths and the Vandals, like they all might be Franks. I'm not saying that that's the case here, but I always, that's what confuses me so much about a lot of these terms is that are they all distinct groups of people, or are some of them later names of some of the other groups of people joining together and then becoming one of them,
Frankish realm later split, laying the foundations for both France and the Holy Roman Empire. The Saxons were a Germanic people from early medieval Old Saxony, which became a Carolingian stem duchy in 804, covering what is now northern Germany. Disputed but possible, there was an earlier Saxon tribe that lived north of the Elbe River near the homeland of the Angles, in an area later known as Nordalbingia. The Saxons' political history remains unclear until the 8th century, when their semi-legendary leader Widukind resisted Frankish expansion under Charlemagne. Before that, the Saxons were not united and ruled by regional leaders. They frequently clashed with the Franks, especially as Frankish rulers like the Merovingians and Carolingians expanded their influence. Charlemagne ultimately conquered the Saxons after the prolonged Saxon Wars, forcibly converting them to Christianity, destroying sacred pagan sites like the Sul and incorporating Saxony in the Carolingian Empire. Under Frankish rule, Saxony integrated into the later Holy Roman Empire, where early rulers expanded eastward, taking land from the Slavic-speaking Wends. Though the Saxons no longer exist as a distinct ethnic group, their name lives on in several German regions.
Here's another example: the Saxons and the Normans. Sure, I've learned about this before. I forget. So you had the Jutes, the Angles, and the Saxons as the three Viking or Nordic tribes of people who began invading England and parts of northern France, right? And so are the Saxons, the Jutes, and the Angles all distinct from the Normans, or are the Normans a later name for one or all of these tribes just in northern France? Or I guess a mixture of native. Here I am using the term native. Again, the native or indigenous just means, what I'm learning, that the people who you encounter when you go to a new area. But by that logic, the people who are there, they encountered people who were natives when they reached there, but then they went out and now they're the natives. Anyway, it's not important. I'm just trying to bring up my hard time with how distinct are these, and how many are distinct and how many are groups
expanded eastward, taking land from the Slavic-speaking Wends. Though the Saxons no longer exist as a distinct ethnic group, their name lives on in several German regions. The Teutons were an ancient northern European tribe, mentioned by Roman and Greek authors as a Germanic people related to the Cimbri and the Cauci. Their homeland was likely in Jutland, modern Denmark, though some sources place them in other...
Cimbri. And I was wondering if the northern English county of Cumbria was... I thought it said Cumbria at first.
And was likely in Jutland, modern Denmark, though some sources place them in other parts of Scandinavia. A major flooding event in Jutland, possibly around 120 BC, may have forced them to migrate southward with their northern neighbors, the Cimbri. Together, they moved through Gaul into Roman territory, winning decisive victories against Rome at Norea and Arosio in 105 BC. But when they split their forces, the Romans, under Gaius Marius, defeated the Teutons at the Battle of Aquae Sixtae in 102 BC. Their king Teutobod was captured, and in a tragic episode, 300 Teutonic women reportedly slew their own children and themselves rather than to be enslaved. Some Teutonic captives later fought as gladiators in the Third Servile War.
Of all of the groups of people that are mentioned in the video, I would have thought that the Teutons, these guys would have been the more recent historical groups. But in fact, they're the most ancient ones talked about so far, at least with records.
Eventually,
because for some reason when I think of the Teutonic Knights, I think of super early Prussia, but that could be totally incorrect. maybe I'm just thinking because they were in that area of later Königsberg.
The Teutons disappeared from historical records. The Cherusci lived in northwest. Eventually, the Teutons later fought as gladiators in the Third Servile War. Eventually, the Teutons disappeared from historical records. The Cherusci
That's crazy. I thought they were way later than that. What about the Teutonic Knights?
lived in northwestern Germania, near the Weser River and present-day Hanover.
Is that some like fairy tale? Teutonic Order? The Hanseatic League time?
Initially, they fought against Germania near the Weser River records. The Cherusci lived in northwestern Germania near the Weser River and present-day Hanover. Initially, they fought against the expanding Romans, ambushing Drusus' army in 11 BC, but failed to press their advantage. The Cherusci continued to resist numerous Roman campaigns, defending their homeland. But by 4 AD, Tiberius had subdued them, and they became allies, even sending their youth to be educated in Roman ways. However, Arminius, a Roman-trained Cheruscan, wanted to take revenge. He led a legendary ambush in the Teutoburg forest in 9 AD, wiping out 3 Roman legions and ending Rome's ambitions of fully conquering Germania. Rome retaliated by stirring up rivalries using the Marcomanni tribe to weaken the Cherusci while launching attacks under Germanicus. Though Arminius continued fighting, internal feuds and Roman pressure prevented him from making further gains. In 1680,
Hey, is this the guy who whose son is Little Boots guy? What's his name? Caligula? Or am I thinking of
launching
someone
attacks
else?
under Germanicus. Though Arminius continued fighting, internal feuds and Roman pressure prevented him from making further gains. In 16 AD, Germanicus led a huge army to defeat the Cherusci decisively at the Battle of the Weser River. Afterwards, Arminius' wife Tusnelda was captured and paraded in Rome. Arminius was assassinated in 21 AD by his own people, and his highly Romanized relatives took over. After a major defeat against their neighbors, the Chatti, in 88 AD, the Cherusci faded from history, likely merging into later Germanic groups like the Saxons and Franks. The Suebi were a large group of Germanic tribes from the Elbe region in what is now Germany and Czechia, including the Marcomanni, Quadi, Hermunduri, Semnones, and Lombards. First mentioned by Julius Caesar during the Gallic Wars, they were seen as the most warlike of the Germanic peoples, expanding southward at the expense of the Gauls. The Semnones, considered the oldest Suebian tribe, are known for their sacred rites in groves with human sacrifice. Under Augustus, Rome pushed into Germania. To escape the threat of Roman domination, in 9 BC, Maroboduus migrated his people and established a Suebi kingdom in Bohemia. They remained neutral during Arminius' Cheruscan rebellion against Rome in 9 AD. Later, pressured by the migrating Goths, Suebi tribes like the Marcomanni and Quadi launched raids into Roman territory, culminating in the Marcomannic Wars. These wars forced Emperor Marcus Aurelius to reinforce Rome's northern frontier, but they foreshadowed the invasions that would later bring down the Western Roman Empire. By the late 4th century, Suebi joined the Vandals and Alans in crossing the Rhine, eventually founding the kingdom of the Suebi in Galicia. Others formed a short-lived kingdom on the Danube before being defeated by the Ostrogoths.
It's really interesting how a lot of big invasions aren't out of just wanting new territory to add to your territory or for plunder or something. Often it's like running away from someone else who's invading you, and then you invade someone else to get away from them. You know, the sea people, like the people who are supposedly caused the Bronze Age collapse, and how they're like, nobody really knew about them that I know of, or not much about them before a giant invasion and collapse. I would imagine it's not too logical to assume that that might have happened to them. Like some other people further away were conquering that there weren't records of, that forced a giant flood of people and then caused the Bronze Age collapse. So interesting.
The Lombards later rose as a dominant Suebi group.
What do I know? I'm just kind of
defeated by the Ostrogoths. The Lombards later rose as a dominant Suebi group, settling in Italy for over 200 years. During Rome's final years, the Suebian general Ricimer effectively ruled the empire. Over time, the Suebi merged into the Alamanni, Bavari, and Thuringi, while some blended into Frankish or Gothic groups. The Alamanni were a confederation of Germanic tribes on the Upper Rhine, first mentioned in 213 AD.
Is that where Alamanni comes from?
During Emperor Caracalla's campaign. Apparently, Caracalla deceived them when they asked for his help, colonizing their lands, executing their warriors, and renaming their settlements before crushing them militarily. Throughout the 3rd and 4th centuries, the Alamanni constantly clashed with Rome, capturing the Decumatian fields in 260 and launching a devastating invasion of Gaul and northern Italy in 268, razing temples and settlements. In 406 AD, they crossed the Rhine for the last time, conquering and then settling in Alsace and northern Switzerland, which later became the heartland of Alemannic dialects. In 496 AD, they were conquered by the Frank king Clovis and gradually Christianized. Their legal traditions were recorded in the Lex Alamannorum.
Did they say Burgundy at the beginning? Or am I imagining things? Sorry.
496 AD, they were conquered by the Frank king Clovis and gradually Christianized. Their legal traditions were recorded in the Lex Alamannorum, and while initially under loose Frankish control, a failed uprising led to their nobility being purged. By the late Carolingian era, Alemannic lords gained independence, with Burkhard II establishing the Duchy of Swabia in 919. Their legacy survives in Alemannic German dialects and in the name for Germany in several languages, including French, Spanish, Arabic, and more. The Frisians are indigenous to the coastal regions of the Netherlands, northwestern Germany, and southern Denmark. Their ancestors, the ancient Frisi, first appear in Roman records during Drusus' campaign in 12 BC. They fought alongside or against the Romans, with some ending up as serfs in Roman territories. Early Frisians were ruled by a high king and worshipped Germanic gods like Thor or Odin. By the 4th century, many Frisians were resettled in Flanders and Kent. Marine transgression.
Why does Odin have an eye patch?
Many Frisians were resettled in Flanders and Kent. Marine transgressions and a worsening climate led to a population collapse, but by the 5th century, they contributed to the groups that migrated to England, leaving traces in places like Frisinghall and Freeston. When conditions improved, new settlers, mainly Angles and Saxons, repopulated Frisia and blended with the surviving Frisians. Conflict with the expanding Frankish Empire led to their conquest in 734, aiding Christian missionaries in their conversion efforts. After Charlemagne's death, Frisia fell under the Count of Holland, but enjoyed a period of freedom, where they only answered to the Holy Roman Emperor. But they could also fight, as shown in the Battle of Nordici, where they repelled Danish Viking invaders in East Frisia. Later, the Frisian fleets even participated in medieval crusades and conducted naval raids across various regions. This autonomy ended in the 13th and 14th centuries, with Holland asserting control over western Frisia by 1422. In 1524, Frisia became part of the 17 provinces and later joined the Dutch revolt in 1568, securing its place within the Netherlands. Eastern Frisia, however, became part of Germany and Denmark. The Burgundians were an early Germanic tribe known for their long hair and immense physical size. Originally from the Baltic island of Bornholm, they later moved to the Vistula region in present-day Poland. By the 3rd century AD, they had migrated westward, settling near the Middle Rhine alongside the Alamanni. They were first noted in this region by Rome around 270 AD and nearly annihilated by the Gepid king Fastida while still in the Vistula basin. By 369, the Burgundians were fighting alongside the Roman Emperor Valentinian I against the Alamanni, and later they were possibly among the Germanic Germanic tribes that crossed the Rhine into Roman Gaul. By 411 AD, under King Gundahar, they controlled cities like Worms, Speyer, and Strasbourg. But in 436, the Roman general Aetius, with the help of the Huns, crushed the Burgundians on the Rhine. The survivors were resettled in eastern Gaul, forming the kingdom of the Burgundians.
The help of the Huns.
This kingdom later became part of the Frankish Empire, but its name lives on in the French region of Burgundy, which only represents a fraction of its former territory. The Gepids were an East Germanic tribe that lived in what is now Romania, Hungary, and Serbia. They shared language and religion with the Goths and Vandals and first appeared in Roman records in the 3rd century. According to legend, their king Fastida led them southward, defeating the Burgundians and other tribes. This aggression caught the attention of the Goths. When Fastida demanded land from King Ostrogotha, he was refused. The two sides clashed near the river Auha, but the Gepids lost, returning to their homeland. By the 4th century, the Gepids were part of the Hunnic Empire. After Attila's death, the Gepids leader Ardaric led a coalition that defeated Attila's sons at the Battle of Nedao in 454, breaking the Hunnic Empire apart. They then established their own kingdom, Gepidia, in the former Roman province of Dacia. But unlike other Danubian kingdoms, they largely kept their distance from Rome. Later, the Gepids were crushed by the Lombards and Avars. King Alboin of the Lombards reportedly made a drinking cup from Gepid king Cunimund's skull. Some fled with the Lombards to Italy, others sought refuge in Roman lands, and a few remained under Avar rule. The Geats were a North Germanic
Jesus.
Cunimund's skull. Some fled with the Lombards to Italy, others sought refuge in Roman lands, and a few remained under Avar rule. The Geats were a North Germanic tribe that lived in Götaland, modern southern Sweden, from antiquity until the late Middle Ages. Alongside the Swedes and the Goths, they were one of the groups that formed the modern Swedish people. Their name still lives on in the Swedish provinces of Västergötland and Östergötland, first mentioned by Ptolemy in the second.
And what about the island, Gotland?
Provinces of Västergötland and Östergötland.
Gotland.
First mentioned by Ptolemy in the 2nd century AD, they were later described by the Roman historian Jordanes as a bold, warlike nation. The Old English poem Beowulf features them, noting that under King Hygelac they raided Frisia in the 6th century. At some point they were overrun by the Swedes, and some Geats are believed to have migrated to Britain, founding settlements in Yorkshire and East Anglia. In the 11th century, the Swedish royal line of Mundsö ended, and Stenkiel, a Geat, was elected king of Sweden. This sparked tensions since the Geats were more Christian and the Swedes were more pagan. The Geats eventually became part of Sweden, but the exact process is unclear. Some scholars argue they were subjugated by the Swedes between the 6th and 9th centuries, while others believe they retained independence. The Thuringians emerged during the migration period in central.
They kind of seem there like the Normans of... They seem like a similar history of the Normans are to England. Maybe that's a bad comparison.
Germania, in
Varangians.
what is now Varangians, emerged during the migration period in central Germania, in what is now Thuringia. Their origins are unclear, but they may have descended from the Suebic Hermunduri. The first recorded mention of the Thuringians appears in a 5th century veterinary manual. They were involved in Attila the Hun's invasion of Gaul in 451, and some believe they were connected to the Turki-Lingi, a group under Attila's empire. The Thuringians established a kingdom that reached its height in the early 6th century. Their king, Hermanafrid, promised half his kingdom to the Franks for help defeating his brother Baderic. After Baderic's defeat, Hermanafrid renegotiated on his promise, leading to hostilities with the Franks. Later, Frankish king Theuderic and his allies crushed the Thuringians and threw Hermanafrid from the town.
Jeez. Greedy, greedy, greedy.
Rick and his allies crushed the Thuringians and threw Hermanafrid from the town walls. Burial evidence suggests
This is classic, like, human-like behavior of, like, I really need this right now. Okay, I'll help. Like, I need help. Okay, will you help me? I'll give you this. And then they join you and you win, and you're like, wait, why should I give that up? They're defeated now. Well, No?
Suggests intermarriage with Hunnic populations. Some Thuringians later migrated to Italy with the Lombards, and Lombard king Agilulf was of Thuringian descent. After the Frankish conquest, Thuringia was ruled by Frankish dukes. Was of Thuringian descent. After the Frankish conquest, Thuringia was ruled by Frankish dukes, but regained some independence under Duke Radulf in the late 7th century. Eventually, they fell under Frankish rule again, and Christianization in the 8th century under Boniface destroyed their sacred oak at Geismar. In 785, a noble named Hadrad led an unsuccessful rebellion against Charlemagne. The Angles were a tribe originating from the Angeln Peninsula in modern Schleswig-Holstein, northern Germany, worshipping the Germanic
English.
goddess Nertus. The earliest reference is from Tacitus around 98 AD, who described them as an unconquerable tribe living behind natural defenses of rivers and forests. Later, they migrated to Britain and established the kingdoms of Northumbria, East Anglia, and Mercia. Their kingdoms fell to Viking invasions in the 9th century, and their ruling houses were destroyed, bringing much of the Angle population under Danelaw control.
It seems like they were almost the guardians of Scandinavia, like at the passage. But then in the end, they were conquered by the people further up north.
Anglia and Mercia. Their kingdoms fell to Viking invasions in the 9th century, and their ruling houses were destroyed, bringing much of the Angle population under Danelaw control. Meanwhile, the Saxon kings of Wessex, like Alfred the Great, resisted Danish attacks and, in the early 10th century, liberated the Angles. By marrying into surviving Angle nobility, Wessex rulers unified the Anglo-Saxon realms, leading to the emergence of a unified English identity. A portion of the Angles remained in their homeland on the Jutland Peninsula, where the region of Angeln still exists today. The Jutes possibly came from the Jutland Peninsula and migrated to the Frisian coast following Danish expansion in the region. From there, they joined the larger Germanic migration into Britain in the late 5th century. They may have been linked to the Euthian Franks of Flanders, which could explain the distinctive Frankish and North Sea influences found in Jutish archaeological sites compared to the styles of the Angles and Saxons. As one of the 3 dominant Germanic groups in early Britain, the Jutes settled in Kent, the Isle of Wight, and Hampshire. In Kent, King Loth.
Isn't that former area, wasn't that called Jutland? Or am I thinking of something else? That former area when sea levels were lower that was kind of connected the UK and the rest of Europe. I could be completely wrong there, though.
Lothier ruled from the 670s, but faced conflicts with Mercia, leading to invasions of Ethelred and Wulfhere. King Cadwalla of Wessex then took control of the Jutish territories, attempting to eliminate the Jutes on the Isle of Wight and replace them with his own people. While he killed their king Arald and his heirs, some Jutes remained. The Isle of Wight was later fully integrated into Wessex, though Kent managed to retain its independence after paying compensation for the killing of Cadwalla's brother Mul.
Great video. One of the biggest confusing things about this stuff is a lot of the times it seems like these names refer to specific ethnic groups. Some of the times they appear like more nationalist identities rather than an ethnicity, and then some seem like a joining of 2 other groups in the list, you know. And so I definitely, that was a very great video and I learned a lot. It's still gonna take a lot more to really solidify my knowledge of this stuff and these Germanic tribes or Germanic peoples, but yeah, that's the big confusion that comes across, is like, are all of these their own distinct people, which some are ethnic groups, but some are people of the same ethnic group but call themselves different things. Some join together and then have a new thing. And so it can be confusing, but it's fascinating and just makes it more interesting in my opinion. So love y'all. Would appreciate any comments down below, answers to any of my questions, critiques of anything I said you thought was wrong. You guys are awesome in the comments. Hopefully I'll see you next video. We'll keep on learning. Bye, guys.